like there was that possibility. Ashley Hodge, who covers Baylor men's basketball thoroughly and heavily, joins us on 365 Sports. Ashley, am I right that there was always this thought that it was simmering that he might be looking elsewhere?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think he was convinced to come to Baylor, really wanted to go to Purdue initially, and, settled on Baylor, so to speak. Stayed for the national championship, didn't play as much as he thought as a freshman. Thought about transferring after his freshman year, was convinced to stay for his sophomore year, had a good sophomore year, had injuries, and played quite a bit, was an integral part of that team that was, a number one seed. Then he came back this year, had to be convinced to come back this year. I think there was just always maybe, he's a great kid from a great family, but just seems like there was just a level of discontentment there, never fully all in. And so now he's in the transfer portal, and I'm sure he's going to be a very attractive piece for somebody because he has 2 years of eligibility left, and he's a guy that's, pretty much, the value type of guy in college. He can shoot the lights out, and he's an undersized guard that's probably not going to leave for the NBA this year or next year.
So, Ashley, do you feel like Scott Drew and staff had a feeling and were kind of already anticipating that could happen, or was there a chance they were caught off guard somewhat by this?
I think they were caught a little bit off guard. I think that, once he went into the portal, not the portal, he declared for the NBA draft, they thought, he would get a grade back that wasn't, what he would like, and that he would come back next year and be the guy at Baylor. I mean, you're a returning player with, 3 years of experience, and you really have a ready-made role and what's proven to be one of the top 5 offenses in college basketball the last, 4 or 5 years. And you're going to get 30 minutes a game. I mean, that's, it's just rare when a player has all that in front of them and decides to transfer. NIL maybe played a big component in this. Perhaps there's a school he already had in mind. We'll see what happens, with this process. But yeah, I think it was a surprise.
Where do you think he fits?
It's interesting. I told his dad this, so it's no secret that I think he would be better in the Pac-12 or the ACC. I mean, he's there's no comment on his toughness. I think he's a tough kid, but he's undersized, and the Big 12 is a grind. The SEC, because of the athleticism, is kind of a grind. Same with the Big 10. I think the Pac-12 and the ACC, where you have some games where you can maybe take a breather, and it's not quite the gauntlet that it is in the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC. I think those would be better fits for him. But the schools I've heard consistently is Houston. I think A&M may be a possibility. Certainly LSU. I've heard some buzz about them a year ago, and then Purdue was one out of high school he really wanted to go to, but then Kansas State is one that I heard yesterday from a really good source. That thought he was going, headed to Houston, but the Kansas State might win out. So, we'll see. But that would be odd to me, the Kansas State for many reasons.
Yeah, that would be I would think that might burn pretty heavily, right, if that's the possibility. Chuck Cooperstein, as you know, knows sports about as well as anybody I've ever known. On the surface, this makes no sense. Cryer, when he played, and he missed a lot of time, was often a starter, always in the rotation, playing for a coach who gives his guards tremendous freedom. What gives?
I agree with what he said. I got a similar text from a national guy, after he's like, this doesn't make any sense. What the hell's going on here? What's the word? Because, Scott Drew is earned the trust of players, and players get better, and they you look at the history of all conference guards under Scott Drew, it's a long list, and most of them are first teamers, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a basketball standpoint. Now you don't know if NIL is a big issue here. Like Pac got an $800,000 deal for 2 years at Miami. And could LJ get something similar to that? Who knows? And I don't even think he gave Baylor an opportunity to see what they could do in that regard. But yeah, I think maybe NIL is a piece here, and maybe he's being promised something big. So You never know what goes on behind the scenes.
Actually, a couple things here. One, part of this, though, might just be the law of averages, because what Coach Drew has put into the transfer portal from guys leaving and what he's gotten out is, look, in your regular business of investing, you would tell people to buy that stock every time, because he's investing at like 5 and selling at like 5 million because of the guys who come in. They're just really good at transfers. So this is maybe just occasionally you're just going to lose a guy who's good, right?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's really difficult, especially in this new age of immediate transfers and the NIL component, to keep everybody happy. And it just shows, like, even if you give a guy 30 minutes and he averages 15 a game and is all conference, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get him back. You have to always re-recruit your roster, which Baylor does an outstanding job of doing. I think that I'm sure Drew's frustrated. I haven't talked to him about this, but he rarely loses a guy that he wants to keep. And the reason is because he's such a player's coach, and he's so positive and he's so encouraging, and guys get better and they compete for championships at Baylor. So this is a surprise from that standpoint. But, I also remember, a couple pivot points come to mind when I thought, oh gosh, this roster is never going to look as good. One was, right after we lost out to Tyler Harris, went to Memphis. And I was like, what are we going to do at the guard position? And then within a few days, Maceo Teague and Davion Mitchell commit. And, of course, we know what that led to. And then the second inflection point, is Mario Kegler. I remember when Mario Kegler got, kicked off the team and dismissed. And you're thinking, oh, wow, this is not good. Right before the season, this guy's a guy you're counting on. And, maybe 2 or 3 months later, we're number one in the country. Baylor's number one in the country. So, I think the point is you got to, trust Scott Drew and the staff. They know what they're doing. 30 minutes a game is a very valuable commodity. I would not close the door on Adam Flagler. I think that there's a scenario where Adam Flagler could return. So Jalen Bridges is, so we'll still, find out about him. But even if, Bridges and Flagler don't come back, I think there's going to be some, really high-level transfers that will be beaten down the door to come to Baylor.
Do you think that they will replace him? I mean, obviously, I know that Little and Jacoby Walter are taller than LJ. Do you think they will go bigger in the guards that they look for to replace him?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, this will give them some really, strong discussion points. I think it's going to be a trade-off. It depends. I mean, if Flagler comes back, then I think you got a guy that can shoot the lights out. And we know Walter can shoot the lights out. He's showed that on a big stage, with the Geico Nationals. If Bridges came back, he's a reliable three-point shooter. You got that. Little is very capable of shooting 35% plus from three. So I mean, I'm sure they're going to want to get a proven guy to add to the mix, no doubt about it. And Bonner, Grimes. I mean, we got a host of options here. I think that there's probably a lot of discussion on let's get back to longer wingspan. I love that.
Yep.
And more athleticism and really if you're going to play the no middle defense, that's a better fit for that. Just having that size and wingspan really makes that a more difficult defense to score against.
Ashley, was there ever the possibility that with Keontae George on this year's team and getting a chunk of them, and I know, again, Cryer, he scored 15 points a game, but did that ever sour it a little bit that Keontae was here and getting a lot of the attention and minutes?
I don't know. It's a good question. It's an interesting question. I think I always say this about Keontae. I heard something today in a conversation that his ankle is really a lot worse than people realized, and there were a lot of agents and NBA people telling him, shut it down, don't finish the season out, and he was like, no, I want to play, I want to do everything I can to help my team win. I think Keontae was a lightning rod because of the inconsistency and just because of the way he finished the season. But I really think he, was outstanding, the way he carried himself, the way he represented Baylor. And, I never questioned his competitive fire. His defense left a little bit to be desired, no question about it. But to your original question, I think that, it could be. I mean, I think that, Cryer knew Keontae was coming in.
Yeah.
And he, and he knew he and Flagler would be the main focus of the offense. But, maybe there's a world where, he just thinks he's should have gotten 20 shots a game. And I just don't think that's going to happen at Baylor. Baylor's, built their success on multiple guys, being options and really, not having to be too dependent on one guy. So if you want to go to a place where you're going to, shoot it 20 times a game, then you probably win less. But, it's everybody's choice to make that decision. And, I like the path that Baylor's on, and I hope they continue on that path of let's share the sugar and let's have a more balanced scoring attack.
Is it fair to say that he would be the alpha this year, and why would you walk away from that unless you're just so, I guess, disengaged it doesn't matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be, I don't know how a rational person makes the decision for basketball reasons. So it's got to be something off the court, either feeling like I'm not featured enough, which is a basketball reason, I guess. But it's got to be NIL or that. I mean, I don't see how you had the success you had, knowing the system works, knowing they won a national championship, knowing that they were a 1 seed last year, knowing that they were a 3 seed this year. I mean, those are all. I mean, the program is just in a great spot, and it just is an odd decision from that standpoint. But it's sometimes you think the grass is greener, and you have to realize it's not, and experience that firsthand. I think if Matt Meyer was honest, he probably would say that. It's each person has to forge their own path, and I think you have to find out sometimes through experience.
Ashley, do you think that there is I'll just use Mark Vital as an example, a psycho Mark Vital type that they might bring in to help reestablish their defensive identity?
Yeah, man, it would be nice. And ideally, I love Mark Vital to death. And if he's listening to this, I hope he doesn't take this as a slight, because obviously national champion and tremendous player for Baylor. And I'll take a guy like him on your team all day long. But I mean, what if you could get that and Royce O'Neal or Ish Wainwright, a guy that can make threes? So if you can get that toughness and that grit and get a guy that can knock down open threes, then I think you got the perfect transfer. So if that's available in the portal, another O'Neal, another Wainwright type, I think that's with modern day basketball, 4 out, 1 in. Having a wing that can shoot threes is very valuable, especially if you lose Bridges. You're going to have to replace it with someone like that can make threes. So, I think if you can find that, that's the ideal transfer.
Ashley, I know Scott Drew is as joyful and positive of a person as there is, but he's also a heck of a competitor. How torn do you think he is seeing another former assistant coach now joining the ranks of Big 12 head coaches that he's going to have to see on a regular basis? I mean, Tang obviously with a heck of a debut, and now Grant McCaslin out in Lubbock, and who knows who else could, eventually join that club as well.
Yeah, I hope they have great success and move on to other leagues. It is tough. Like I feel for the coaching staff, and it's awkward. I think that those guys had to take those jobs. Those are opportunities that you might not get. So I totally get it from their perspective, but yeah, being in the same conference is kind of awkward, and it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamics play out, and especially if you have a situation where a transfer, from your team, a guy that you want to keep, ends up on another roster with one of those guys. That's going to be awkward. And I don't think that's, something that's going to, bring warm fuzzies if that's the case. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, it's a cutthroat business, and certainly there's going to be some interesting storylines.
Ashley,
with those
I'm sorry. Ashley, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Really good background. Knew it would be. He's even mentioned he's spoken with LJ's father, and so Baylor does have 30 minutes to offer somebody, whoever wants to play here. Not to mention a national title 2 years ago, 3 seasons now, but 2 years ago, and a part of an incredible conference in the Big 12.